the January 2025 meeting. We'll go ahead and get started with roll call.
Richardson.
Here.
Garza.
Here.
Magers.
Here.
Goss.
Here.
Bass.
Here.
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening, Craig Hochschild from Trinity United Methodist will be giving our invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, as these council members and leaders have gathered this evening for this city council meeting, we humbly ask for your guidance and wisdom. May the discussions be marked by compassion, understanding, and a commitment to the betterment of our community. Grant them the discernment to make decisions that reflect the needs of all our citizens and empower them to act with integrity and fairness. They've been granted the privilege of serving. Help them to bear up under the weight of that privilege. Bless their deliberations with your presence. Amen.
Amen. Next item.
Number 4, election of the mayor.
All right. The open for nominations. We need a nomination and then a second, and then we'll take a roll call.
I move to nominate Sir Stacy Goss as mayor.
Sir Stacy Goss.
I'm sorry.
Do you need a
Okay,
pen?
I do.
do they have a second?
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call.
Richardson.
Yes.
Garza.
Yes.
Magers.
Yes.
Bass.
Yes.
I think
Huh?
I abstain, right?
You can either way. You can vote for yourself.
Goss.
Yes.
Do you want to swear her in, move us around, or do you want us to go ahead and elect the other one, the vice mayor?
Do the second one.
Swear in.
Oh, we're doing it over here.
She's got the vice mayor with her.
Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Stacy Goss,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the ordinances of the City of Hutchinson,
and the ordinances of the City of Hutchinson,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties of mayor
and that I will faithfully perform the duties of mayor
for the City of Hutchinson.
for the City of Hutchinson.
So help me God.
So help me God. Thank you.
You don't have to switch seats.
You might be wrong.
Straight.
Okay.
Number 5, election of vice mayor.
I messed up the first one.
I'd like to nominate Scott Magers.
I'll second that.
Richardson.
Yes.
Garza.
Yes.
Magers.
Abstain.
Bass.
Yes.
Goss.
Yes.
I state your name.
I, Scott Meggers,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
The Constitution of the State of Kansas.
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
And the ordinances of the City of Hutchinson.
and the ordinance of the City of Hutchinson,
And that I will faithfully
and I will faithfully
perform the duties of Vice Mayor
and perform the duties of Vice Mayor
for the City of Hutchinson.
for the City of Hutchinson.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. I guess I'll let you take over. Anyway, we're going to have about a 10-minute recess. I think Jessica would like to get a couple pictures, and there's some tea and punch out there for the new mayor. So,
For everybody.
not for everybody.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay.
We will now move to item 6, petitions, remonstrances, and oral communications from the audience. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes and to items not on the agenda. Audience members may address items on the agenda when the item is discussed by the council. Thank you. Please state your name and your... John Stoll.
My name is Quincy Baker, 5828 Yucca Road. I'm with the Kansas Green Party, and I'm with Free Palestine Hutchinson, a starting nonprofit, right now just a community organization. Sorry, I'm just gonna get a timer so I can make sure I stay on track.
Thank you.
I was gonna have a partner, so to address a couple issues, and since I'm not, I'm gonna go ahead and speed through and try to address both of those issues, since that person could not be here with me. Upon writing this, 46,416 Palestinians have been killed by the IOF since October 7th, 2023 alone. 28 on January 1st, 90 on January 2nd, 61 on January 3rd, and 66 on January 4th. Upon writing this, 45,225 Palestinians were killed on December 1st. That means 1,191 Palestinians were killed in just 1 month. Upon writing this, 17,663 children have been killed by your tax dollars. Out of 10,000 hostages being held by the IOF, up to 290 children are in IOF prisons, tortured, at least 85 with no charges or trial. Upon writing this, up to or beyond 350,000 Palestinians have been killed by the IOF since October 7, 2023 alone. This is the true death toll. This includes forced starvation, inflicted disease, and now freezing to death. Upon writing this, 203 journalists have been killed by the IOF, not allowing them to tell their stories. 5 on December 25th, Christmas Day. Amin, Fadi, Faisal, and Ibrahim, and Mohammed. 2 on January 2nd, Omar and Hassan, killed by your tax dollars. And 457 days of genocide. This was written on January 5th, 2025. Upon writing this, 7 infants have died from hypothermia. This is freezing to death. 8 such fatalities in 8 days' time, December 24th to 31st, 2024. In Gaza, 110,000 out of 135,000 tents are completely deteriorated, and 92% of housing units are damaged, using destruction of infrastructure and exposure to weather as a weapon of war. This is why the true death toll and the direct death toll are so different. Upon writing this, 736 humanitarian workers have been killed by the IOF since October 7th, 2023 alone. 6 on January 4th. On December 27th, IOF abducted hospital director Dr. Hassam Abu Safia, making the hospital basically unoperable. After whipping him with an electric cable in front of the hospital patients. Free Dr. Hassam Abu Safia and make the hospital functional again. This was after bombing the hospital and abducting several of the patients at the hospital. This was all done with your tax dollars. Upon writing this, 582,051 Hutchinson tax dollars were used to make this possible. And Hutchinson is invested in companies that make the weapons that the IOF uses to displace, imprison, and kill Palestinians overseas. This is a local issue. I am working on a specific resolution to propose to the council, but I am asking that the council members look into investments, partnerships that tie the Hutchinson city to this genocide. Genocide is a local issue, and I ask that the council members and our community look at genocide as a local issue. I do have just a minute left, so I do want to just briefly address the second issue. I will not have time to go over the whole thing. So let me just get to it.
Mr. Baker, that is the conclusion of your 5-minute time.
I do have 15 more seconds. I'll just briefly address what my second thing is.
15 seconds, please.
Okay, so, and the other thing is we have a gas plant that is going to bring in us. I'll just say that I have an active petition out for a gas plant that is being planned to be built, a natural gas plant that is being planned to be built in south of Hutchinson.
And that concludes your public comment period.
And all
Thank
the
you.
information is on there. So I just encourage people to look at that petition.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak in public comment? Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda. Any discussion or questions?
I do not have any questions.
I do
don't have
not,
no
and I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
I would second.
Thank you.
Yes.
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 Item number 9, new business. A, consider approval of the 2024 housing needs assessment by RDG Planning and Design.
Good evening, Council. Carissa Paxton, Housing Coordinator. I am excited to introduce Amy Hossey from RDG Planning and Design. She has been working with us since April to unveil our housing needs assessment. She's spent countless hours in our community pouring through data from all over our county and has prepared an amazing assessment and a really exciting presentation to share with you guys tonight. So I'm going to let Amy take it away.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us here today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I was told to remember to speak into the mic better so the folks at home can hear better. It's been a pleasure over the last few months to get to work with all the residents of Hutchinson and of Reno County. I'll probably share a few times. I think we do these all over the Midwest, and I've been very impressed with the passion, excitement, and the work that has been done in the housing realm here in Hutchinson, and I think it's something you should all be very proud of. But tonight we'll focus a little bit on where we saw from what we learned from the market analysis, public engagement that helped us identify some of the challenges and opportunities, and then go into kind of our goals, objectives, and strategies. I'm going to kind of move through this pretty quickly. Otherwise, I could spend like your entire council meeting talking about housing because I think it's such an important, passionate issue. But if there's something you have a particular question on or want me to delve into a little bit deeper, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm trying to be respectful of your time and other items you have on your agenda. So starting off with a little bit of the population analysis itself. One of the things that we heard from the community is that you have an aging population, which is true. You're an importer of individuals who want to retire here, which I thought was pretty interesting. But we also have a pretty good birth rate, and all of those things continuing to support the population that we have today. I think one of the things, though, that jumped out at us when we first looked at these numbers was your 2020 census number just really didn't make sense to us. Based on the building activity we were seeing, based on what we were hearing with regards to the vacancy rate and some other things. So I'll delve into that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. But it was one thing that kind of jumped out at us from the very beginning. One of the other things that we think is really interesting is the number of people who drive in every day to Reno County. There's the number of that actually drive into Hutchinson from outside the city limits is even greater. But A lot of those individuals are coming from somewhere in Reno County, but for those individuals who come in every day to work here, this is another statistic that we like to kind of look at, because we know you're not going to get all 9,400 people to choose to live here, but is there a percentage of people who, if they had the right housing, would choose to live here rather than make that commute on a daily basis? We also looked at the building housing stock itself. You have an older housing stock. I'm probably not telling you anything you weren't aware of. 47% roughly of your housing stock was built before 1960. A lot of that is concentrated on the south side of the city. So you can see on the map on the left here, the lighter yellow you get to is some of that older housing, and it is located more on the south. And then the brighter the orange, the lower the value. So there's usually a correlation between those two pieces, which is good in certain ways and also has some challenges in certain ways. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. We also did an analysis of where we're at with regards to affordability. I'm going to keep this really simple. I always joke that in certain ways this is one of our most complicated graphs or charts that we have in the housing study. But what this is doing is the green line is our number of households, and the blue bars are telling us the number of housing units that are affordable in those income ranges. So what this tells us is we have a lot of housing that's actually pretty affordable. And that correlates, obviously. We have an older housing stock. Older housing tends to be a little bit more affordable housing. It's our naturally occurring affordable housing is how it's often referred to. But I always make that joke on the far right of that chart. All of those individuals that looks like we have a green line but no housing for them, they're living in units, right? They're not living in their car. They are living in those units on that other end of the spectrum. So they're filling units that are affordable to our moderate and lower income households. So how can we make sure that we're creating some movement in the market that frees up those units that are often harder for us to produce? So this will be one of the things that we look at when we start to talk about strategies. I'm going to go back to, we talked about the population piece. So when we looked at the numbers, specifically building permit numbers, and we said, okay, if we just looked at the number of building permits, which was about 142 net after we took out the demolitions, and we look at the number of people per household, we would have about 329 new residents. We also do an analysis. There we have a 2020 predicted. We do an analysis that looks at our 2010 census numbers and apply birth and death rates to that. And basically say if nobody moved in or out of the community and all that we had were babies being born and people passing away based on statistical averages, what would our population be? Well, under that scenario, we would actually be at a population of about 41,745. If you added back in the 329, you would end up with a population of about 42,000. So rather than a loss in population, this would actually have said that you had about a static. You at least maintained, and you didn't see a 2,000 people out migration, which we didn't felt right to us, and our committee kind of agreed with us. So that was the base number that we kind of worked with moving forward. So based on that, we started to look at where we think we're going to grow into the future and applied some annual growth rates based on historic trends. And apply that both to the county, Hutchinson, South Hutchinson, and then the balance of Reno County. When we apply that number, I'm not going to go into explaining this whole table because, again, we could be here all night, but I'd be happy to delve into it more. So to reach a population of about 44,000 by 2035, we would need to add about 1,000 additional units, or about 92 units on an annual basis. We also, one of the things that we heard, and apologies if this is a little bit harder to read, is we do have this older population. And a lot of times what we find in communities is those individuals are living in the homes that they raise their families in, right? There are 3-4 bedroom homes that our young families are potentially looking to move into. And maybe those homes aren't really what they need anymore either. They don't want to take care of the yard. They want they don't want to worry about shoveling the snow. And they'd rather go to their grandkids' soccer game on the weekend than take care of all of these things. So do we have the housing options that make sense for them? But we also say not everybody's going to leave their homes, right? That people love their neighborhood, they love the home that they raise their family in, whatever that might be. So we never assume that we're going to capture all of those individuals. So basically this analysis looked at if we captured 1 to 5% roughly of that population in the future, what would that generate? What kind of demand would that generate? And that would be anywhere from 100 to 500 units potentially. That would be kind of our low maintenance, sort of independent living sorts of units that might be appealing to that 55 plus households. Okay, so moving on to some of the challenges and assets that we began to identify. And this is based both on the data and then the input that we received from the survey and from some of the listening sessions we did. One of our key things that we identified was we have some neighborhoods where our home values are below the cost of new construction. And I am gonna pause on this one and talk a little bit about it because it is an important one. It's sometimes what we refer to as being an undervalued market. And what that means is that basically if you have on a block, you have a block of homes that are valued at $90,000, I'm just gonna use that as a number, it really is pretty challenging to come in on that one vacant lot on that block and build a $250,000 home, which is pretty much what new construction costs. You know, your bare minimum's probably going to be, because everything around it is lower value. So it's a deterrent from individuals wanting to invest in those areas sometimes. So that's a really important one, and one of the reasons I wanted to kind of pause on that. Housing conditions, especially in some of our rental units, is perceived to be in poor condition and is a concern for many residents. We have a growing number of moderate income households that are cost burden, and what that means is they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. We have construction that really hasn't kept pace with job creation and the need for kind of that direct development in challenging areas too. We have a perceived quality of life images that support young professionals and families. So one of the things we heard is sometimes our young professionals and younger families might be, that's our commuting in group sometimes. And how can we provide them with the quality of life things that will make them want to choose here? And then finally, we have older adults that want options for housing but aren't necessarily seeing them. Okay. So what are our opportunities and what are the positive things that we should be building upon? You have a lot of really successful programs and initiatives that have built value back into neighborhoods. So that undervalued piece that I talked about, that it is an issue, you've got some good examples of overcoming that and building value back in those neighborhoods. We have contractors that are working in housing rehab. This is actually pretty unusual. I was sharing with our committee, usually we say, can we talk to somebody who's doing housing, doing rehabs or flips? And most communities are like, yeah, we really don't have anybody that's doing that. We had a whole group of individuals who came in to talk to us about that. That's pretty exciting to see for your community. We have a lot of public support for housing interventions, and that we saw that in the survey data. We have a community-based development entities that are investing in what is perceived, at least, as risky markets, which is a huge attribute. We have older adults that want options, so I kind of marketed that as a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. We have rural communities that have strong reputations, and finally, we have the support from the community and employer partners who want to be at the table. Okay, so what are some of the goals and objectives based on the information and data that we collected? I'm going to take a break here, pause here, and just say, do we have any questions? Because I feel like I'm talking really fast.
When you talk about a neighborhood being undervalued to the market, was that the right term?
Yes.
Is it, even if someone wanted to invest, does that prohibit them, I would imagine, going to the bank and getting a mortgage if it's not going to appraise? For
yeah, and that's exactly what you're kind of getting to, is that that sometimes means that they're going to have to come to the table with at least 20% or potentially more of capital to make that project that work, because the bank's going to look at it and say, ooh, you know, it's not going to appraise to what's adjacent to it. Yeah.
I feel like you're saying a lot of things that I know John and I have had this conversation about housing in town both being transplants, and it's everything you've said so far has really hit the nail on the head. I spend a lot of time driving in between our schools for work and kind of navel gazing about like the housing market and, oh, here's an empty lot, what could go here? And then I think of all the reasons why you wouldn't, and it's all of the things that you said, but then thinking of the possibilities, again, it's all of the things that you said. And I think that it's just always been hard to sit and like think about what's the actual solution. And I know you're going to give us some ideas here. So that's really exciting, but it just always seemed like such a complicated issue, and we haven't had real benchmarks to start. So hopefully that's your jumping off point.
Yes. Well, and I think, like you said, it's a complicated issue, so there's no one solution. It's a mix of the other things, and I think that's where you guys are well positioned with some of the things you've been doing to continue to build off of that. So that part's exciting. So going into some of the goals, and this kind of ties in exactly with what we were just sharing there. Starting off with, we need to preserve and protect our existing housing stock. That's our best source of affordable housing, but it also means that we're maintaining value in in those neighborhoods too when we can improve those. So it improves the overall quality of the rental stock. So these are some of our objectives. We want to maintain the stock of naturally occurring affordable housing, and then just reduce the number of homes that must be demolished every year. We need to leverage the assets that we have. So here we want to make sure that we're identifying new funding sources for agencies with proven success. We want to expand existing initiatives and establish new partnerships. Increase production of our housing oriented to those over the age of 55. So by doing that, one of our objectives is we want to free up housing for young families and first-time homebuyers. We want to ensure, too, that individuals are in supportive and healthy environments, right? People should be in housing that's appropriate for their stage of life is often how we describe it. And then just preserving our existing housing stock. Strategically reinvest in neighborhoods to stabilize value. So here we want to make sure that housing rehab and new construction are financially feasible. We want to meet the objective of encouraging private market reinvestment in housing, and then finally just building community pride, right? We always have a lot more pride when we see well-kept properties and neighborhoods. And then finally, investing for success. And the objective here is we want to continue to make sure we're finding ways to attract young workers and families. We want to support value stabilization, educate renters and first-time home buyers, and then, again, back to that building community pride. So what are some of the strategies that we started to identify? And I'll kind of go over these pretty high level. If there's any of these that you want me to go into more detail on, please let me know. So starting off with preserving and protecting our existing housing stock, some of these strategies that we identified here is first establishing a housing development fund. So over the last few years, or at least since 2020, we've been in unprecedented times. I will say a little sidebar here. So I've been doing this for over 20 years, 25 years. And for many years, I would say to communities, we are not going to see any more state or federal, especially federal funding coming to housing. Like, we got to figure out how to do this locally. And then 2020 happened, and we saw this, like, lots of money coming in, and a lot of it that we could use towards housing. And in Hutchinson and Reno County, you have used that very effectively, I think, and we've seen it in some of the stabilization that's happened in those neighborhoods. But that money is coming to an end now. The ARPA funds are being used up. So how do we continue the momentum that we've established? And one of the things that we said is we need to potentially be looking at how do we set up a housing development fund that allows you some of the flexibility to use that money in ways that are strategically advantageous to Hutchinson and to Reno County. So in this, there's lots of ways that we can begin to fund that sort of thing. It's not just all taxpayer dollars. That could be a piece of it that's going into it, that the communities or the county, but our employers, our nonprofit, or our philanthropic organizations, all of those individuals being able to, or groups being able to put into this fund. So we outlined a lot of different ways that you can begin to capitalize that sort of fund. And sometimes I like to think about it too as we got to think about housing as economic development. And we put money into economic development funds this is kind of that same sort of idea here. We want to expand outreach and knowledge of available programs. So there's a lot of good things happening. We need to make sure people are aware of those. So continuing those efforts, expanding opportunities for tenant and landlord education. So what's it mean to be a good tenant? But also, what's it mean to be a good landlord at the same time? So how are we making sure those things are happening simultaneously? And then just minimum rental standards. How are we making sure that we're keeping everybody safe and healthy? Establishing a housing development fund. So this goes into leveraging assets. And one of the things that you'll see is that there's sometimes some of these strategies overlap with the goals. So we try to identify here's the goal and here's the strategy. So sometimes strategies help implement more than one goal. But I'm going to skip to B here since we've already talked about A, and establish partnerships for bulk buying and insurance coverage. So this was one of the things that we heard was the issue with rising insurance costs. You aren't the only market that we're hearing that from, but that was one of the things that kind of rose to the top, was just concern with the cost of insurance, especially for our more affordable housing stock, being really important. And then just where are the opportunities to be able to be doing some bulk buying that can help reduce some costs from the organizations that we have here today. Our next goal, increasing production of housing oriented to those over 55. So here, how can we leverage tools to encourage more accessible housing opportunities? So partnerships with developers, site preparation, financing tools, things that can incentivize those types of housing products. We also probably need to update the zoning code in a few locations just to make it, to add more flexibility on lot size and product types across all districts. So right now, nationally, you're hearing a lot about how ordinances are an impediment to affordable housing. It's one piece of the puzzle. It's a piece that we need to make sure we remove those barriers. But I always say just fixing your ordinance isn't going to mean you're going to get a flood of new development. There's other financing things and so forth that we also need to make sure that we're addressing. And then finally, when we have programs, how can we maybe prioritize funding to projects that locate affordable housing adjacent to transit and other community services, right? Because housing and transportation and daycare are probably the three most expensive items in a household's budget. So whenever we can, how can we tie especially housing to being close to transportation options? Our fourth strategy, or our fourth goal on strategically reinvesting in our neighborhoods. So this is where we got to think about that gap financing. So that undervaluation, how do we fill the gap between what it costs us to build something and what it could potentially get appraised at? How do we begin to fill that gap? And then there's things, so there's the gap financing potentially out of the development fund, but we also have programs you're very lucky here in Kansas of having programs like the Moderate Income Housing Program and so forth that we can leverage for some of that gap financing. But we can also do things like waiving fees. Now, waiving fees is not going to be the silver bullet either. It's probably going to be a very small percentage of that cost of that development, but it's one way to say, hey, we want to encourage and support this. Target programs and policies and incentives to different areas over time. So I actually feel like the community has actually done a pretty good job of this, but this is something we always kind of warn about. Sometimes you'll have programs that are trying to do, bring a housing quality up, and you'll see where we'll do a house here, and we'll do a house there, and we'll do a house here. Where can we maybe target that energy a little bit more? Because it builds momentum, right? So if you see in a neighborhood, wow, all of these houses they got new sidings and new roof and paint job or whatever it might be, and it just feels, it builds energy and it builds momentum to go to the next project. It also builds momentum sometimes for people to go, that house and that house have all kind of fixed up. Maybe I should mow my lawn and clean up and paint my house. And so it builds momentum in that way too. We need to assist with valuation increases too sometimes that we see. So one of the things that we're hearing in a number of communities in Kansas and Nebraska, so I'm from Nebraska and we're hearing it a lot here too, is great, I made improvements, but my valuation went up and now my property taxes went up. So how do we make sure we can maybe help with that graduated value improvement? or value that happens. And the NRP program is great for that. It's especially great for, that's our neighborhood revitalization program. I'm sure you guys are aware of that, but I should probably say that for the public. It's a great program, especially for our investors that want to invest in the community. And then just continue to support and expand the purchase rehab resale program. This is a program that already exists, that a couple of our nonprofits are already doing here in Hutchinson. This is a program I frequently recommend in communities, and you're doing it already. So we need to continue to maintain that. It's a great way to provide safe and affordable housing, especially for our first-time home buyers. Finally, investing for success. Invest in schools, invest in parks. I always say these, especially for housing in those areas, when the park across the street looks great and the street's in good condition, all of those things are reasons for people to continue to invest in their own property. And then just implement priorities identified in our other strategic planning efforts that have been happening here in the community outside of just the city. But how can we continue to move those efforts forward that can help support those quality of life sorts of initiatives? So I ran through those pretty quickly. Other questions?
Going back to your graph from earlier in regards to housing available for different income levels, household incomes.
Yeah.
So one thing I took away from that was kind of interesting is, so it's more competitive at medium, at the first 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough at higher income level stock.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's definitely, we continue to need to have more market rate construction happening in the community. Now, that does not mean we don't need more affordable housing continuing to be built too, because we're not going to get everybody to move out of there.
But we're creating more competition at that level because people can't find available housing
right,
at the
exactly.
different levels. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's always interesting, and I tell this in a lot of communities. One of the things we'll hear is, wow, we need more housing that's, just under 200,000. And we start to look at the numbers, and it's like, actually, you've got a lot of that housing. It's just people are living in it, and because they don't have an option to move to something else.
So what have you seen in regards to the last couple of years as people took advantage of the lower interest rates, and now they're just, I don't want to buy a new house because I'm at 3%.
Right.
I want to be at 7%.
And that goes back to exactly what I said of why we're still going to need programs that help us fill that more affordable housing, the kind of below market rate units that we need in the market, because we are going to have a number of households that are exactly what you said. I just refinanced at 3% a couple years ago. Why would I move? We're going to be in a window of time here, I think, where people are going to move because the house really just absolutely is not fitting their needs, or they're relocating for some other reason. But yeah, and that's going to be another barrier to getting movement in that market.
I had a friend share a story that they had a low interest rate currently, and they were looking to essentially move, buy a bigger, upgrade their home, and because of the interest rate and the equity, they were taking out a smaller amount, but the interest rate essentially made their payment the exact same on a smaller, the amount that they were taking out was much lower. And it just didn't make sense to them to make that kind of a shift. There wasn't any savings. There wasn't any real advantage. And that's the high end of the income. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's just nothing for sale down there, and you see it, or it is for sale, but it's not. I mean, it's a $50,000 home, but it's not really livable. It's not anything that would be move-in ready. Right. And if you're looking to buy and that's your income level that you need to be at, you probably don't have the money to invest in those types of rehabs.
Well, and that's why I'm such a big fan of the purchase rehab resale program, because a lot of times in that range, those households will qualify for those programs, and they don't. They're overwhelmed, or they don't have the equity to do the rehab, and so those types of programs. Now, I always do caution: don't assume those programs aren't great for the worst house on the block. Sometimes, so if the house needs $200,000 worth of work, they don't work out. The numbers don't work out in those, but the homes that need new HVAC systems, new roof, new siding, driveways falling apart. Or I always share the story that actually my brother-in-law, who's disabled, that they used that program in their hometown to make the house accessible. So it can be a great resource.
I've heard similar stories that Stacy mentioned, but everything I'm reading with the increasing cost of home insurance that the bank requires you to have, that is going to chase people around and have them trying to be able to afford where they live. It's not just the interest rates, but you had a slide about bulk buying. Was that bulk buying of insurance? Building supplies, it was kind of around that.
Yeah, so there was two pieces there. The bulk buying was specifically around building materials.
Okay.
And especially when we start looking at like the work that our nonprofits are trying to do and our work that individuals are trying to do in the kind of entry level price point sorts of units, what some opportunities that we can do there. There is the insurance piece, and so we do a little bit of an analysis on what it would mean to try to look at trying to create a pool of self-insurance. But that's not easier. That's pretty challenging too. So, and the insurance piece is a little bit of a national issue right now too. But yeah, so they're kind of two separate.
Yeah, I'm more curious about that solution.
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to have a domino effect on all of this.
Yeah. And we probably heard the concern on the insurance piece more probably from some of our rental providers, especially our nonprofits that are trying to provide affordable rental options, and the rising costs there, because even our market rate that aren't income restricted, they pass those increases on in insurance to our renters. So when we're seeing the cost burden going up for our renters is much bigger than the cost burden we're seeing going up for our owners, and a lot of that has been driven by what we're hearing in other markets. I'll say that because we've done some surveying in other locations, and a lot of our landlords in one survey we did said the reason they had raised rent in the last 18 months had been increasing insurance costs, increasing labor costs for their maintenance and all of those things, and then increasing taxes because their valuations were going up.
One other interesting thing that I want to point out is the census numbers that you shared. I try not to buy into conspiracy theories, but the census numbers never have sat right with me. And so I find your predictions really interesting, that we didn't, I think, it was like 500 homes would have been empty or something like that. And it was like, where? That's just not, you don't see that driving around. Like rentals are full, daycares are full. I mean, nothing was pointing to match our census numbers. It seemed just like it was just non-participation.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah. We've had the opportunity to work with Garden City and Dodge City. In fact, they just finished up a update with Dodge City. And actually the folks out in Garden City have done a really great analysis of the undercount, and what is referred to as the at-risk population for being undercounted. And so it's not unusual to see that in locations where we have a higher at-risk population. So at-risk populations are minority populations, and low-income households are more at risk of being undercounted.
Do you think the rising cost of insurance is going to push people more out of the market in purchasing to renting? I mean, because that cost doesn't seem to go down, and then they've added in there too, where some of these houses you have to replace the roof before they'll even insure it, or it depreciates out so quickly that if you lose your roof, you're not going to be able to pay for it. So I don't know. It's just a concern that I have too.
I think that will vary from market to market. When we start looking at the median home value here in Hutchinson as compared to some other markets, you're a little bit more on you're on the more affordable side. So I think you're going to see individuals, especially as rental rates have gone up, that you might still see people who will say, it's cost me just as much to buy all-in mortgage, you know, with my rent and or with my insurance and taxes and everything. I'm still coming out about the same as what my rent costs. The issue is, can they come up with the down payment and all of those pieces?
Do you think the affordable housing in this area, where people from the East Coast, I mean the West Coast, are moving more centrally, do you think that will raise everything to make it a little bit more challenging too?
Of just individuals coming here because they're seeing
raising the house prices here to
well, you know, I mean, when the more competition we have with the lower the supply, that's, you know, that's the economic of supply versus the cost. So I was actually sharing with Carissa right before this a piece that I was listening to that reinforced something that we've been kind of saying, that, you know, those individuals, if we're thinking it more from the investor sort of point of view, that they're coming in here and picking up properties because it's an investment opportunity, versus we're moving here because we've retired and, you know, we want to retire to a much more affordable place. I mean, that's great, right? Because we got people filling houses and shopping in our stores and all of those things. From the investor point of view, they want to go to markets where they think the housing isn't being produced fast enough, and that it's going to continue to support rental rates that are going to continue to go up. So production will continue to help alleviate that desire of outside investors wanting to come in. Well, happy to answer any questions if you have them. If tomorrow morning you think of something, just pass it along to Chris or Dave, and we'll be happy to answer anything additional that you might have. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to work here in Hutchinson and with all the residents. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve the 2024 Housing Needs Assessment by RDG Planning and Design, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Richardson?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Magers?
Yes.
Goss?
Yes.
Bass?
Yes.
Item 9D, consider real estate contract between Adriana Perez and the city, and an agreement between New Beginnings Incorporated and the city.
Paul Brown, City Attorney, and Shara Gonzalez is here for New Beginnings. You'll see a couple of contracts before you. Has primarily to do with the real estate that we currently own at 12th and Hayes for future development. City staff determined that additional parcels in that area would help with the development. New Beginnings happens to own a couple of those parcels. New Beginnings also had a need. They'd like to see the property adjacent to their offices at 200 West 6th acquired so that they could use that. So we decided we're going to help each other. We will purchase the property at 206 West 6th for $15,000. We will deed that to New Beginnings. New Beginnings, in turn, will deed their two parcels adjacent to the 12th and Hayes property to the city of Hutchinson. And I gave you just a couple of little aerials for you to look at. If you look at the first one, it's got a kind of rectangular blue box. That's 206 West 6th. It is immediately next door to the offices of New Beginnings, which they would like to acquire. And the other aerial is of two parcels that are directly south of the city-owned parcel. And that's what we're talking about here. So we'd ask the council to approve the contract with Adriana Perez for the purchase of 206 West 6th, and then the agreement between the city and New Beginnings to basically exchange those properties once ownership has been completed. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Villegas for kind of spearheading this project and making sure that this moves forward at the pace that it has. I think this is just one creative way that we can contribute to the solution of the housing issues in Hutch. And I look forward to what's next for these properties. It's pretty exciting. Those are obviously prime for development. So that's all I have. Oh, would anybody like to speak in public comment? Seeing none, looking for a motion.
I move to approve the real estate contract between Adriana Perez and the City of Hutchinson, an agreement between New Beginnings, Inc. and the City of Hutchinson, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second that.
Richardson?
Yes.
Garza?
Yes.
Maggard?
Yes.
Goss?
Yes.
Bass?
Yes.
Item 9C, consider approval from Tesserae for enhancements to the zoo master plan in the amount of $23,325.
Good evening. I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. Before I jump into this, I just want to make sure everyone heard the investment in parks for our housing assessment. So that was great. That is what I got out of that. Okay. Zoo master plan updates. A few meetings ago, I mentioned that we were going to look at our master plan again and make a few tweaks, a few enhancements to it. So I just want to give you a little bit more detail on what that's going to look like. We really have three areas of focus. The first one is the train tracks or the Prairie Thunder Railroad, looking at adding some exhibits along the way, trying to make that as a value add, so something that we're going to try to increase ridership of our train. The second piece is the native species exhibit, kind of a native Kansas prairie exhibit. But I also want to point out that the one idea that we do have is trying to create some sort of overnight experience at the zoo and using this large multi-species native species exhibit as an opportunity to have some sort of overnight experience. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. And then the third piece is to activate the pond. When we did the community hall meeting at Memorial Hall, I had the drawing, the master plan drawing, the current one of the zoo, and everybody was attracted to the pond. Everybody wanted to do something on the pond, and so I think we maybe missed some opportunities there to really look at that and how can we make that be a really defining piece or a really defining feature of our zoo. The other exciting thing is all three of these have the potential to generate revenue. I think it's been very well commented and noted that people really value our zoo and value the fact that it's free. But we have to be creative on generating revenue. I don't know that an entry fee is the right way, so I think these three options bring possibilities for revenue to try to keep it free to the community. As far as deliverables, we'd get an updated actual plan document. We'd get an updated timeline and phasing plan, which will drive the CIP process. We also will get updated rendering, and then our goal is to have this complete sometime either May or June of 2025, trying to align this with our CIP process so we can look at projects moving forward. So I mentioned the overnight experience. So I just want to give you a little bit of idea of what that could potentially look like. So these pictures are actually from Leawood. This is Ironwoods Park, the south end of Leawood. They have a series of 5 cabins. Primary use for these are like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those types of things. There's 5 units. They all have a slightly different floor plan. And then in the center, so the far right picture, there's kind of a fire pit area where they can do a cookout, do other sort of kind of group activities. You're probably somewhat familiar with some of these images. So this is Kansas Wildlife and Parks cabins. So these cabins are going to be much smaller. They probably can accommodate 3, 4, 5 people at most. So those were just some ideas. The other idea would be a large lodge, so a singular building that can maybe have 8, 10 rooms or something in it. So those are all kind of ideas we want to explore and see what would make the most sense. So it is my recommendation to proceed with Tesserae So the master plan previously was done by GMLV. They changed their name to Tesserae, so it's the same group. And the cost they gave us, the proposal was $23,325. We do have the funds in the park reserve to pay for that. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Now these would come and stay at these cabins, correct? Is that what we're looking at?
That's what we want to explore. We want to see if that's a possibility. You know, what would the cost of them be? What would the return be? So, what, you know, how much could we charge per night? What do we think the occupancy rate would be? Does it make financial sense to do that? Is there revenue to be made? That's an experience that there's not really any other zoos that have that experience, that immersive experience. You know, the idea would be you could look out your window and see, you know, bison, or look out and see, you know, elk, or whatever else is in that mixed species exhibit. So
The bear.
the bear would be across the pond. You know.
I like the idea, especially it would enhance our golf course too. You're right there, go across the street. Is that where you're going to put it and go golfing on our great golf course that we have?
Yeah. If it makes sense, I think the only way it would make sense is if we really market it not just towards zoo guests, but anybody who wants to come to our community, and just a unique experience when it comes to lodging. Whether they want to play golf, whether they're here for the tournament, whether they're here for the fair, whatever. Just trying to make kind of a unique experience for an overnight stay. It just happens to be right in the middle of the zoo, so I'm sure they'll take advantage of that as well. So.
I like it.
I think it's a really cool idea. Having littles and my friends from Kansas City, we always try to get them to come, and we're like, well, yeah, we have the Cosmosphere, we have Stratica, we have all these cool things, but you can only do those so many times, and then it kind of wears off. You know, the appeal kind of wears off for little kids. So I think this is just one more neat thing that Hutch has so many unique offerings, and this could be potentially one of them. Like you said, it's not, you can't really name another place where you're going to go stay in the zoo. I don't think even Tanganyika has an overnight option. So I think this is really cool and creative. It sounds like you're aware there's a lot of due diligence yet.
Yeah, and that's really what this was. I mean, those other two pieces, so the pond and the train, we definitely need to look at, but the bulk of that will be to really examine this overnight opportunity and if it makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's definitely worth exploring.
I think that what you're recommending for that is, you mentioned it just briefly, but during fair time in JC, that thing will be booked, not with littles and parents. It'll be booked with people needing a place to stay. Yeah. So it might meet another need that we currently have and will have for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I mean, that's just a great thing to bring more places for people to stay and bring people to Hutchinson for another niche in our market. So it's a cool idea.
We will get an ROI.
Yes, that'll be part of it to understand what that looks like. So we'll look at how much would they cost to build per unit? Mm-hmm. What could that nightly fee be? What can we anticipate for occupancy rate? I did a little bit of research, Kansas Wildlife and Parks, in their peak season. They didn't define what that was. On their cabins, they have an occupancy rate anywhere from 25%, which is actually the one here, the fairgrounds, to over 80%, which is like at Milford Lake. So, so I think there's a demand for these types of accommodations. So.
I'll tell you what I like about it more than anything. I like it about more just because it will enhance our south end town. We'll have to do something. There have to be a lot. Could be new street lights or something for people coming through to get to this cabin. They have to go to South Main. And South Main will have to help it a little bit, enhance it, so people will say this is a beautiful city. Put signs in front of the park. I don't know, but I like it. That will help us. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than just building 3 or 4 or 5 cabins along the pond. There's a whole, how do you get there? How do you feel safe getting there?
That's right.
All sorts of things.
Yes.
So.
This is a start.
Yeah.
And we got to start somewhere on the south side. So I like it, really like it.
Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to speak?
I just want to say I spoke a few council meetings ago and said that we wanted to bring like unique, cool ways to the city, and I think that's exactly what I was thinking about when I was saying that. So like staying at the zoo, never heard of that before. That's exactly what's kind of idea that I would be thinking of, that I would like. Rather than, oh yeah, let's go to Wichita. No, let's go to Hutchinson and stay at the zoo. That's the kind of thing that would get people to come here and come stay here. So yeah. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any additional comments from council?
So let me get this straight. We're just okay for you to go with this, to start looking at this, right?
Yeah, so just really the planning process, just to see financially if it makes sense.
Okay.
Where would we build them? What infrastructure would we need to build them? Those sorts of things. So we're just agreeing to study it in more detail before we come back with any sort of a plan to build anything. That would be a completely separate item. Yeah.
And this study includes the other enhancements to the master plan.
Yeah.
So the other train ride and loop enhancements too. Do I have a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the proposal for test array for the enhancements to the zoo master plan in the amount of $23,325 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Richardson,
Yes.
Garza,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bass.
Yes.
Item number 10, report of city officials.
Steve, you are first.
I thought that you'd be different, Mayor.
We might mix it up.
Huh?
We might mix it up. I'll consult IT. But you guys didn't move.
We'll see what the learning curve is on you. It was a while for me.
Okay, first thing, I think I've told everybody so far since I've been on this council, I've been 6 years, that things are changing. If you can't tell by now, things are changing in the city of Hutch. I wish you all the luck, Mayor. I know you'll do a great job, and we're here to help you. And you too, Vice Mayor. We're here to help you, and I think we're going places. So, one other thing I want to say, next week I'll come up with a place that we're going to have a meeting and have people calling me, ask me when my next meeting is. I will come up with a place by on the 21st city council meeting. I will let you know where we're going to meet at. So, you heard it from me here now. If you're watching me, I'll have you a time and a place by the next city council meeting. Other than that, I'm glad everybody's coming out. We have not a lot more people are coming out to the evening meetings. Come on out if you hear me. See, I told you to work, didn't I? Look at this. They're here. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
John?
I don't have much. I just want to note that all the coordination and work and strategies that went behind trying to roll with the changing forecast and changing environment over the weekend was impressive. I think I had a lot more positive feedback on how that went, and very little negative. Even some of the negative interactions, like it wasn't that big a deal considering the entire situation. So I just want to commend everyone that was involved with that. That's all I have.
Scott, I guess?
Okay.
You pick.
Yeah, I want to. I think our city did a great job. All of our staff, everybody was involved with the snow procedure. I was kind of out in it too, and they did a great job clearing things out and keeping things rolling. And I've heard great comments back about it. Yeah, there have been a few little negatives, but it's a learning curve. We'll do better the next time and keep going. So, and then coming back to, I don't think we've had a council meeting since the Dragons won the national championship. So I want to congratulate them on bringing that championship back home, and Drew Dallas' staff and the team. So, and I think that's all I have.
Well, great. I would echo those with the snow removal. Nothing but positives that I've heard, and just I want to thank Enrico and Chief Beer for showing me what was going on in the middle of the storm. It was good to meet with some of those guys and to see what they're doing and how they serve our city as employees. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to serve as mayor. very blessed to be able to do that. John, I think I hit it just right, got to be a part of some really cool things, but all of us up here, including you, had those things in the works before, you know, some of us get lucky enough to take credit for it. But it's everybody up here, and I just appreciate the trust that the community members had in me, and hopefully I represented the city of Hutch well. And thank you for that, and congratulations, Stacy. You'll do fine. You'll have lots of new ideas and maybe a younger mindset.
Well, thank you. It has been, well, thank you to the council for your trust in me, and from the community for your trust in me as well. You can stop making the joke that I only got 3 votes to get here, because it was like 3,179 or something I checked the other day. But anyway.
You didn't have an opponent.
It still got more than 3.
Why do you want to bring that up again? But you're here.
But it is one of those things where, because a person is in this seat for only give or take 12 months, a lot of stuff and a lot of work has been happening behind the scenes and publicly. And so when a new person takes the seat, they get to take credit for a lot of really cool stuff that they probably had very little to do with, that the real work was done the year before and the year before, and it's just now coming to fruition. And so the name on the you know, on the authorize the mayor to sign, the name on the official documents changes, but the people who did the work, that doesn't change. And I promised myself I was not going to get choked up today, and I'm not. So I just want to say thank you. I'll keep my remarks brief. I think even just tonight in the items that were presented to us, there are a lot of really interesting projects on the horizon, a lot of things to be hopeful for and proud of for our community, opportunities for our community, and things to look forward to, even just the housing alone. If nothing ever happens and nothing changes with the zoo, and we just get our minds wrapped around the housing project or around the housing issue, that would impact so many lives. So I look forward to doing the work with all of you, and Mr. Villegas as well, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you. So for me, just a few items. The State of the City, January 15th at 7:45. So be there, be square. And I will echo a lot of the sentiments of the council. I am very excited for 25 and beyond. And I am firmly committed to making sure that we stand out above our peers in the marketplace, whether it's the zoo, housing, or anything else. So we will be the place where people want to visit or live. So I'm very excited about that and for the years to come. I do have Cecil. He'll be coming up to provide us some snow updates. So.
Evening, Council.
Evening.
Cecil Weibel, Public Works Director. Just wanted to give a little brief update. It's been a long couple days. I know a couple of you have been out working in it as well. So, this is the first event we've had since we tried tackling residential streets. That went really well. I think we had good feedback. The crews were able to get in and out. I don't think there was any streets but a handful that we actually skipped because of parked cars. And we had some citizens contact us after and say they moved the cars, and we went back and got a few more of those today. So we're continuing to work through that. But just the brief update, since the storm started January 4th, we have spent about 860 man hours, either pre-treating or attacking the storm. We actually still have a crew out currently on Main Street until 8 o'clock tonight, loading that out, trying to get the last of those piles out. We'll probably finish that up tomorrow. But so throughout the storm, we used 8 tandem dump trucks with plows and salt spreaders, the 4 new trucks with plows, and then we had the 1 other small truck. So 13 total trucks out plowing and moving snow, sawing salt. Used 33 employees for that 860 hours. We used a lot on pre-treating, since we also pre-treated all the residential streets this time. So we actually used 34,000 gallons of salt brine for this storm event. That was in pre-treating and pre-wetting the salt while we were out. That also equated to 349 tons of salt. So it was a very cold event. The salt did its job slowly, but we are getting some good melt. So through all the lanes, lane miles pre-treated and or plowed, cycling that through a couple times on certain streets, we did something to about 4,000 lane miles within Hutch. So that's a lot of time spent behind the wheel moving snow around, sometimes tandem and 3 trucks wide. So just wanted to kind of touch base on that and see if you had any comments or concerns of how it was going, anything from your districts, and we try to readdress it and see if we can build on what momentum we have. So,
Got a question for you.
yeah,
As an old signal technician, did you recall the lights at all?
we did recall all the lights that were on the older camera styles. The newer fisheye cameras, we did not need to this time.
Is that a new style of camera? Does it go to automatic recall, or what's
It doesn't. It actually, it's a fisheye that points down, and it's got a different heating system in it. We didn't have that issue because of the lens pointing down instead of out. So we were monitoring them, but we did not have to put those newer cameras on recall.
I see. Just for you guys know, recall means that the lights will go by themselves. It'll keep giving a green light by itself without no car being there. When I was there back in the olden days, I guess, we had to manually go out there with our bucket trucks and put the camera on recall so the cars can keep moving. Or you remember sometimes our lights will get stuck and everybody wonder why we're stuck. It's because the camera can't see. So recall is a backup mode that technicians go out there and put a camera on recall. And that's why the lights keep changing by themselves all the time. If you ever see a light changing by itself all the time, it's probably because it's got a problem with the light and the technician had to put it on recall at that point. So that's what that means, and that's what happens in Hutchinson. And I would like to thank you. The technicians are doing a good job. So
Yes.
yeah, I was just wondering if it's changed that much. New cameras are different now, right?
New cameras are different. We've got a few of those in place. We're testing them out. 5th and Monroe, 30th and Plum, and 30th and Halstead. Those 3 are all the newer style cameras, and having pretty good luck with them. So continuing to work through that and start seeing which way we can update the cameras as we continue. So
Thank you, Cecil.
yep.
I think you guys did a phenomenal job. I didn't drive for 2 days, maybe, but I did today a little bit, and everything looked great. And then on the way down here this evening, we saw 2 big trucks with plows and moving snow, so everything looked good. I didn't get any complaints. I saw a few on Facebook, of course, but I think they would complain about anything. But I think you guys did a good job. What is the best way, or what's the most efficient way right now to report like a stalled vehicle in a street or something like that? Is it C-Click Fix?
I'd say the C-Click Fix
Okay.
would still be the best way.
Okay, and I noticed they're not too far from my house. There's 2 vehicles that look like they were in a wreck, and I would assume that the people are coming back to possibly try to privately tow them before the city goes out. How long of a window of time do people have to move those vehicles in that type of a situation?
I'd say if it's in C-Click Fix, that goes out to everybody, including PD. Chief might have a better
Okay.
answer on how fast the police
They should
department will come in.
try to get them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think they're in a restricted area. They've obviously been in a fender bender.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you.
One last question on how many loops do we have left in the city?
I don't know exactly. I'd have to get that number, but we are trying to get rid of the loops.
Are we still microwaving them at that point?
A few of them, we still have some microwaves. They're the new way we've been going. Like I said, the camera system seems to be the way to go for typical traffic, but you're never going to be able to get away from the microwaves, especially for that long distance read, 30th and K61
Right.
to see down that stretch. But yeah, we are typically trying to get rid of the loops just for maintenance standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say you guys did a great job. I mean, the streets are a lot better than, previous years we've seen storms and the streets are just horrible for, depending on the weather, they could be weeks. and I think that's going to be a great thing. Did you guys have any issues or? I mean, like, you know, your hours, do you think there's a way to trim that down a little bit, or do you think that's a pretty, I mean, this storm was so hard because it was freezing rain to start with, then the snow came in, and everything else, it wasn't a fun one, so.
Yeah, no, we're always looking for what new advancements we can look at and see what we can do. We've been really working with trying to use, we'll call it tandem. You know, we'll have like 3 trucks run at the same time. So 30th Street, Main Street, K61, we can wipe that whole direction out in one pass instead of one truck making multiple passes back and forth. And that seems to be saving a lot of time, and it gets out of the traffic's way faster. So it's just one of the ways we're working towards it. But we're also looking at what we may be bringing to and looking at some other equipment we might be trying to purchase in the future. Potentially getting some wings for the bigger trucks so we can extend that path even wider and be able to reduce the amount of trucks in one area, so those trucks can get to the other areas and reduce that time.
Are you happy with the equipment we purchased, the new trucks and plows?
Yeah, those new plows did great in this storm. Everything seemed like I said, the weather cooperated to some extent, but I mean, it wasn't ideal, but it could have been worse. If we would have got that half-inch of freezing rain they were talking about, then this would have been a totally different conversation.
I don't think you need to play that down. I think you and I both know how this wasn't a great storm.
Oh, no.
It was a problem, and you handled it very well. And I appreciate the little tweak I noticed was this morning you're doing this all downtown intersections with the hand stuff you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you getting the streets done first. Nobody's coming downtown. The businesses are closed. I just remember in years past, they're just so worried about these little, it's like, perfect, you know, get the streets done and then do that little bit of detail work. But great job.
I wasn't downplaying what you did. You guys done a phenomenal. I was just curious if you're like, well, if we did this or we did on that.
No, I think, you know, it's a great job and not an easy storm.
No, not at all.
You know.
So. Yeah, we had a lot of help from other departments. So, talking about the downtown stuff today, the utilities department was out actually doing that, so the street crews could focus on the road. So
yeah, and there was one guy here sitting in this audience that was late today because he was cleaning those corners.
So yeah, utilities guys help with that and keep us going. So
I do have one other question. Did you get the city manager in a truck and a plow and get him?
You know, he was
working?
all suited up and ready.
I was born ready.
But yeah, no.
He probably would have slowed production down. So
I don't know. He might have. You know, we got a lot of new characters, so he may have showed them some good tricks. So
I got several calls from him. When are they going to do my street, Mayor? When are they going to do my street?
They got the mayor's street done.
Yeah, that's right.
I had to get you guys taken care of first.
3 wide. Let me tell you, it was cool.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cecil.
thank you.
Any additional remarks, Mr. Villegas?
No, that's it.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Yes.
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 Yes. Hey, Garza,
Yes.
we need to redo this. You need to move down on the side.